A Musical Life with Astral founder and president Vera Wilson. Vera Wilson is the founder and president of Astral, an arts organization in Philadelphia that has helped to launch the careers of classical music superstars such as pianist Simone Dinnerstein, Grammy Award-winning guitarist Jason Vieaux, and the classical crossover group Time for Three. This episode of A Musical Life is brought to you by Astral, advancing classical music's emerging talent. For more information on Astral's current roster of classical musicians and concert schedule, visit astralartists.org or call 215-735-6999. Welcome to A Musical Life. I'm Hugh Sung. For young classical musicians, the path from conservatory to career can be a daunting one. Vera Wilson, my guest for this episode, sought to provide a unique service to help the most talented musicians through her visionary organization, Astral. Now in its 24th year, Astral has become a vital Philadelphia institution, providing concerts, community outreach, and education programs, as well as invaluable training and support for their carefully selected roster of artists. As I mentioned in the intro, Astral has had an incredible track record for helping their artists launch major careers. Let's listen to one of their alumni, the classical crossover group Time for Three. Vera, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hugh, thank you so much for inviting me.
Can you tell me about your musical upbringing in Buenos Aires? I understand that you're not a musician yourself, but you fostered a deep love of music from a very young age.
Yes, my brother, who was 11 years older than me, he was quite an avid pianist, and he was playing the Tchaikovsky piano concerto as I was growing up, and I just was fascinated by the music. It was also the golden era of classical music in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, and the Teatro Colón was in its prime. And so I went to so much musical events, And I just became totally fascinated by classical music, and from a very early age wanted to pursue something that would keep me connected with music. Along the way, when I was about 17, I thought, wouldn't it be great to connect classical music with youth and see how we can help them to progress in this world of classical music when they graduated from their studies. That was when I was 17. It took me 30 years to put this into practice under the Astral umbrella, because a lot of things happened in the intervening years.
It's remarkable that you had such a singular vision at such a young age. Did that inform your decision as to whether or not to pursue studies on an instrument as opposed to something more along the lines of what you have today?
My musical background is very limited in terms of performance. I did study the piano for 10 years, but it was always the practicing that was hard for me. Still, I managed to give a few recitals for my teacher in a big theater and play rather well. But it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to participate in music at a very high level with young people.
I'm going to skip ahead. You got married. You came to the United States in 1968, I understand.
Yeah, but there were other years. I got married. I lived in Australia for a year, and we had our first child there, our son. And when he was barely 5 weeks old, we left Australia and went to England. But we took the journey. We did the journey on a ship, and that took 5 weeks. When we arrived in England, our son was double his age, so we left when he was 5 weeks. We arrived when he was 10 weeks, having traveled more or less around the world, more or less.
What caused you and your husband to travel so much during those years?
He had a specialty in engineering, which took him to all these international jobs. Prior to us getting married, he had lived in Poland, he had lived in Hong Kong, he had lived in the Lebanon and other countries, Spain. And so this was just the continuation of that. And so we were in England then for a year and a half. By this time we had a daughter. And then came 1968 and the brain drain when, companies were merging and the employment market was shrinking. And we got an offer to come to the United States at a time when we had thought that we would be either going back to Argentina or remain in England, but we came here instead.
Here, of course, being Philadelphia, and there's a little personal side note. One of your sons, Peter, is Peter the oldest, or is he
No, he's the youngest, actually.
Peter is actually good friends with my younger brother, Philip. They actually went to school together, so we have that personal connection.
That's correct. And then they were in youth orchestra together, in the Philadelphia Youth Orchestra.
I didn't realize that. What did Peter play?
Peter's a percussionist. And has remained a percussionist. That's his profession.
How about that? So there's that personal connection.
Yes.
We were bound to be together in some way or fashion. Now, you've traveled and you've lived in so many countries, and I read on your bio that you speak 5 languages fluently. Which languages are they?
Well, obviously Spanish, being from Argentina, English, French, German, and Italian.
The most useful languages for
They're
classical
very
music.
useful, but the Hungarian is very much in my ear because my father was Hungarian, and I sort of vowed a few years ago, or a lot of years ago, that I would learn Hungarian before I died. I haven't done it yet, but I might.
Now, these extraordinary language skills came in very handy when in 1983 you became the special assistant to Eugene Ormandy, the legendary conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra. I understand that you also became the orchestra's foreign press translator, a position you held until the year 2000, and you also provided these translation services for the New York Philharmonic, the Pittsburgh and Boston Symphony Orchestras, and
the opera company.
And the opera company with the Luciano Pavarotti competition. I'm wondering if you have any interesting stories that you can share from your life and work as a translator for these esteemed musical institutions.
It may not be the most flattering, but I wish I'd had an equally esteemed fee.
Fair enough.
Yes, I did all of those translations, and really the fee that I did receive, while very modest, was the source of early revenue for Astral. So I didn't keep it. I just thought it was a perfect opportunity to start enhancing Astral's budget.
So this was really, your plan was using these modest funds as seed money for what would eventually become.
Astral already existed in this present form at the time. Actually, not at the early stages of this. In 83, there was no Astral in this form. I was working for a foundation with a similar name.
I was going to ask you about that because I read that you were with the Astral Foundation, which gives grants to young musicians. I wasn't sure. It
used to.
I see.
That foundation closed down. I was working for it. I was on the board, and then they closed down. And before they did, I asked if I could use the name to create the successor organization. So I changed the name slightly because obviously we weren't a foundation. And I used the remaining funds from the foundation, which were minimal, to survive for the first year as the new Astral Artistic Services, which it was when we first started.
Oh my goodness.
The name went through a couple of transformations since then. It was Astral Artists, and at some level it still is, but it's basically just Astral.
I see.
Now.
I see. Well, we're going to delve much more deeply into Astral in just a moment, but I want to lead up to it a little bit. I understand that in 1980 you started doing some volunteer work with the Curtis Institute of Music, which is one of the most remarkable conservatories in the world for young classical music education. I get the sense that was a very special watershed moment for you working in that institute.
It was the first time that I was able to implement what I had thought about when I was 17, working in a classical music institution with young people. While I was an unofficial staff member, if you will, because I was totally volunteer, and I did call my hours. You know, I still had young children. I wanted to be home when they left for school. I wanted to be home when they came home from school. So it was September through June, 10 to 4. But I enjoyed it very, very, very much. And it was, what gradually sparked the possibilities of creating the Astral that opened up in 1991, which I founded under a new mission and have run under that mission since.
It's funny. I had prepared this question, and hearing your early response, I realized I don't think this question applies anymore. Steve Jobs said in his famous commencement speech at Stanford University that, quote unquote, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. But in your case, it almost feels like, you've turned the question around, because I'm hearing from your story that you very much had those dots planned. At least you were seeking out every opportunity to enhance those connections to lead you to where you are now. For you, you've done PR and audience development work for the Concerto Soloists of Philadelphia. In fact, I think we met when I won one of the competitions.
Yeah,
Remember? You remember that?
Yes,
many
yes.
years ago.
I had forgotten that, however.
I think you helped me. you were with me as I won one of their young artists competitions early on. You also have coordinated special projects and annual chamber music tours for Curtis. You worked with the Lincoln Center Orchestra 2001, Philadelphia Youth Orchestra. In a sense, you were collecting and amassing all of the administrative, cultural, and networking skills that lead perfectly to doing what we're going to talk about more in depth now, Astral.
Well, I really believe in that, and it's not exclusive to Astral, but I think that any job that you do, even if it is sticking labels and looking at mailing lists, really informs some future job that you might have, because of my good memory for languages, I also have a great memory for names, telephone numbers, special dates, and zip codes. And the zip code business came from sticking labels. And I know that doesn't seem that important, but when you have your mailing lists, or when something gets returned, or any number of things I can't think about right now, I can go back and say, oh, that came from sticking labels. And like that, every position that I had, however menial, really helped in the next job or the one after that. So my theory is that you learn in every position, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a paid executive, whether you're well paid, or whether you're just, doing translations that are not so well compensated. That really builds your background, and it's very useful at some point in your career.
So now let's get to the heart of the whole message. Tell us, what exactly is Astral? What did you envision Astral to be? What exactly is this?
What I envisioned Astral to become was an organization that would provide free services to musicians who were graduating or still students of the major conservatories, who needed career guidance, career development, career advice, and who were aiming to be soloists or had a small chamber ensemble, and who once graduated had really nowhere to go. There was, to my knowledge, no other organization that offered free career services that had a concert series as a presenter attached to it, and that from inception had an outreach program for the Philadelphia schools and for the community at large to share the music of the musicians that we eventually gathered onto our roster. So it was a very painstaking and detailed process of establishing the mission, of establishing the purpose of the organization, and to delineate as clearly as possible over time the function of a nonprofit that didn't charge for the services it provided.
We were discussing a little bit. I was asking whether this question was going to be appropriate to ask, and I'm going to go ahead and ask it now because I think it leads in very perfectly. We were discussing about Young Concert Artists, which is another organization based in New York City. It was started actually way back in 1961 by Susan Wadsworth, and this is, on the surface, it appears to be something quite similar. The young musicians go to New York, they audition to become part of the YCA roster. And when they win that, they get presented at a venue. They basically have management for a certain period of time. And help me understand what differentiates Astral from Young Concert Artists. I think you already alluded to part of it in the fact that not only do you provide concerts for the artists on your roster, but there's also a very committed educational component for the public, for the schools, for the community at large that encompasses the musicians, the artists that go through your program.
First of all, I didn't know about Young Concert Artists when I got started. Perhaps it was a blessing because I followed the path of what I thought our organization, Astral, should be like without feeling that competition. But in actual fact, it isn't that much of a competition because Young Concert Artist is exclusively a management organization. So the musicians that are accepted onto the roster expect bookings and more bookings. As useful as that is, that's only part of the story. Astral has its own presenting arm. We provide concerts for the musicians, but we also have this extremely extensive outreach and community engagement program, where we go into the Philadelphia schools, where we go into the homes for the handicapped, whether they're mental or drug-related or otherwise handicapped, to senior facilities. And we actually have concert series in all of these places. So they become our community partners. The purpose of this is to give the musicians a chance to put into practice the repertoire, their goals, their dreams, their wishes, by performing in a safe environment that is not going to get a nasty review in the paper, but that becomes a journey towards their ultimate goals. In the process, we're sharing the music with the community, we're sharing the artists and their personalities with our audiences. They're able to follow this journey of our musicians from inception, so they have to be a little accepting of those less polished, perhaps, although our musicians are pretty polished, but when they start, it's different than when they finish our 5 or 6 year relationship. And so I feel that we're all in this together. It's a program of Astral, but shared with the community. Our primary constituents are our artists, but we present them all over the city of Philadelphia.
And some very non-traditional venues.
Some very non-traditional venues. And we have the luxury of having a dedicated person who is a former music teacher go to all these events, every one of them, and provide feedback on the spot of the performance that just happened.
Now, is this just musical feedback? What sort of feedback can the artist expect?
It's every kind of feedback imaginable. It's musical, of course. It's about how they address the audience by speaking. If they talk too fast, if their diction is too unclear, if it's inappropriate to the audience, that particular audience. I mean, you don't want to go into very advanced age senior home and have a program that is all about death.
So even programming selections and ideas.
Yes, and also, and this is especially important with the younger audiences in the schools, to introduce new repertoire, because we do make commissions from young composers and some more established composers that we would like our audiences to not be scared of and to be able to accept more easily than if they were just presented a program and told, yeah, it's all modern, contemporary music. Oh, well, I won't bother going. So it's a whole exercise in developing the artist to the point where we'd be so happy to hand them over to a commercial manager who can then take the career to its utmost level.
If you don't mind, I'm going to ask a rather personal question, simply because of my experience working in business and understanding how a business is started from scratch. You know, when I was with AirTurn, it's literally me, my friend, one other friend, and we just pooled our money together. So I've seen what it's like to start something from absolute ground zero. Now, you had mentioned you had taken these modest sums from your translation work, and eventually you had what you thought was enough to start Astral. I had always been under the impression that for starting something with such a grandiose vision, you'd need millions and millions of dollars. If you're uncomfortable telling me the exact number, but I would love to know, how much did you save and start with to get you through that first year?
First of all, when I established this successor organization, from all my estimates, I thought that from the predecessor organization, I would get $25,000. And I thought, well, that'll see me through the first year. But actually, there weren't $90,000.
Oh, wow.
So that gave me a little bit more time. I was taking a salary for a short while, but then I thought it's much more important that the organization do well than for me to take a salary, and it's a luxury to be able to say that. So I was very lucky that my husband provided, and I was able to dedicate myself to the organization. So $90,000 may not seem like very much
No.
to establish Astral, but it lasted me 4 years.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
We didn't do 180 programs at that time, like we're doing now, nor were we a staff of 7, nor did we have 28 artists as we do now. So it was possible to pay the rent and provide a fee to the artists when they performed. It was horribly hard to get the foundations and the corporations engaged. The understanding of the mission, was very low. And so I thought, okay, so what I'm going to do next is take a guitarist where I don't need a piano. I just take a guitarist to a corporation and ask whether we can perform for the employees. And at that time, I went to Arco, which was a chemical company, where the luck I had was that the manager of this department was a lover of music. And so people brought their lunch bags to the performance. I must tell you that performer was Jason Vieaux.
Who has recently won a Grammy Award. How old was he at the time?
He was 23, maybe.
Oh my goodness. It's a little bit like asking Michael Jordan to step in. That's incredible. I mean, he's an incredible guitarist.
He is at the top of the world.
Yes.
And so that was my first corporate contribution.
What was the reaction to that event?
The reaction, we were actually in a lunchroom, so the door was able to be closed. It was a smallish space. I thought, people are bringing paper bags, brown bags. It's going to be making paper noises, and, the guitar is a soft instrument.
It is.
And
It's not an electric guitar. This is an acoustic guitar, which
this
is
an
quite
acoustic
soft.
guitar. There was complete hush. And so this manager told me afterwards, that he had no idea how many people actually played an instrument in his corporation, and came up to him and said, that was a wonderful idea to bring this young fellow here and to allow us to listen to him at no cost. Some of those people then came to the public concerts, having heard him there. And it was the beginning of then getting a second grant, this time from a foundation, and gradually transitioning from being really poor and limited by the funds to being able to think a little bigger so as to eventually become what we are today.
I'm going to ask if you could put us in the shoes of a young artist, let's say a musician. They're perhaps still in school or just about to graduate. And if you could perhaps describe what is the audition process like for somebody who wants to join Astral?
Well, it's been simplified so much through online applications. It used to be a paper application that had to come in the mail with a CD, with photographs, with recommendations, etc. All of that can be done online now. And we market and advertise the auditions in the conservatories through the teachers. I write a personal note to the teachers who I have a personal relationship with, and remind them that the auditions are coming up, and please could they steer their ready students to apply. It's received here within a day. The applications are sent to the various panelists who we have also online, who we have selected for the first cut, which is the so-called CD cut. And it's anonymous, it's blind. They get a CD or whatever the online method is, the MP3, and they just know it's a violinist or a cellist or a pianist. The list of applicants is reduced to those who they wish to hear live. We have 4 audition dates, for the various instruments.
These would be the live auditions.
The live auditions.
Just a quick question. For the recorded portion, is there a required list of works that they have to play, or a certain amount of music?
There are guidelines. They're not special pieces, but usually a piece by Bach, and then something classical and something contemporary. But they can choose their repertoire.
So there's a lot of creative leeway.
There is. Occasionally, we consider the fact that somebody is a specialist in contemporary music and can't provide such a varied program as we request. As long as they let us know ahead of time, we say, fine, this is your specialty, and you should apply with what you prefer and what you play best. Then we have the audition dates. The panelists gather here, and at the end of the auditions, on each day, we reduce the list further to the ones who they would encourage us to accept onto the roster. Years ago, we used to accept them from that audition. We thought it would be better to add another element to the audition, and that is the personal interview from those who have been narrowed down. The object of this is to get to know the musicians a little bit more than through a 20-minute audition on stage from afar, and to make sure that their goals align with our possibilities. And from that, and also we're checking their entrepreneurship.
I just wanted to step back a little bit of memory lane. In the 23-year history, Astral has had such an incredible track record for launching the careers of really some of the most prominent musicians of our time now. Now, looking over some of your laureates, I have so many memories coming back to me when I actually accompanied many of their auditions. Folks like flutists Jasmine Choi and Mimi Stillman, pianists Di Wu and Michael Mizrahi, who's also enjoying a wonderful career, clarinetist Jose Frank Ballester, and some unusual instrumentalists. You remember the saxophonists Doug O'Connor?
Oh, yes.
And I especially particularly remember the accordionist, bandoneon player Lydia Kaminska. Do you remember her?
How could I forget?
I think the first ever classical accordion bandoneon player.
Yeah, and she was the first, and I think perhaps still only, one with a doctorate.
Yes.
And she came from Poland to study in the United States because it was the only place where she could get a doctorate.
You shared a wonderful story of guitarist Jason Vieaux. I'm wondering if you have any other special memories of other artists who have launched their careers with Astral.
Well, the biggest name, I think, today, in addition to Jason, would be Simone Dinnerstein.
Yes, the pianist.
The pianist.
Remarkable pianist.
And, when she came to us in the year 2000, what she wanted to do was to launch her career with the Goldberg variations.
The Bach-Goldberg variations. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for expanding. And we thought,
launching her piece with just one set of pieces, so to speak.
Well, yes, but she also had this notion, that there weren't any women pianists who had, after Rosalind Turek, who had recorded the Goldberg variations. And so that was her mission. And so we worked with her every step of the way. She was able to gradually raise the funds. What we provided was marketing, interviews, features. One of the reporters and critics followed her to New York to be there when she was recording and interviewed her during her recording. Well, we all know where Simona is today. And so she was so enterprising. She is so enterprising. And so, that's a big success for her, but it's also a big success for us.
Absolutely. But you've also, yeah.
And, it's never only Astral who launches a career. It's what the artist brings, what the artist absorbs, and what the artist chews and digests that then makes it possible for them to reach the heights that they were hoping for. Astral is a guide. Astral is a supporter. Astral is a presenter. But it requires all these forces and all these networkings to come together. So we don't usually say, they're there because of Astral. We just recognize that they came through our doors.
Very much a family atmosphere.
Actually, that's what the artists say. We would love to join the Astral family.
Yes, yes.
And that is a recurring reference.
If I may ask one final question, what does the future hold for Astral? What is it seems like you had such a strong vision from such a young age. And now that you've reached that, what's next? What's left?
Well, what's left is the future. And obviously, I'm not as young as I was when I started or even when I conceived the idea. But that's all part of the planning. As I mentioned earlier, we have a staff of 7, including me. And we have a transition plan for the day, whenever that is, that I either retire or step back sufficiently that somebody else has to fill in. And we have a young staff. 5 of the staffers are people in their 30s or early 40s who share the vision, who share the mission, and have the passion to take the organization forward. Founder-driven organizations sometimes are in peril of not having a future, because if the founder dies or if has to retire for some medical or other reason, what happens? I think we've done our homework so that regardless what happens to this founder, the organization and the artists will have a secure future.
That's truly remarkable, given how so many organizations, as you mentioned, are imperiled because of founder hubris. But you have such beauty and grace and humility to see this vision far beyond yourself and really serving the world.
Well, I sort of feel it's much more important for the organization to survive than for me, to be eternally visible. And I think the main thing is to share with the staff. I honestly don't know how to put this in words, but to make sure that everybody is as committed both to the organization and its healthy survival as it is to the artists who trust Astral.
Now, we were talking about the fact that Astral artists are being presented in some very non-traditional venues, nursing homes, hospitals, schools, of course. What if I'm somebody that maybe just has a lovely house and a nice piano or just a large room? What do you look for in a venue? Or let's say I want to have musicians in my home. Is that an option for me to contact Astral?
Absolutely. We ourselves have a series of 5 home concerts that we conduct in salon form. And, there is a host, there is a home, there is a performance, and there is a meal. And there's a dinner. And so the host would absorb, the cost of this, but a private concert in your living room, what could possibly be more appealing?
Do you have a minimum size for the living room for such a concert?
No, I think it would have the host would determine how large a crowd they wish to have. On the other hand, if this becomes part of this salon series that I just mentioned, it would have to be able to accommodate the subscribers. It is a subscriber series, and we would aim for about 35. If it's a private concert that somebody wants to have where our subscribers would not be a part of that, then it can be the size that they wish.
That's remarkable. So anybody really could host a world-class musician at their home.
Yes.
Do they have to have a great piano?
Well, obviously, if you're engaging a pianist,
Well, yes, but let's say...
they don't have to have a piano because we have string players, we have a saxophone quartet, we have, string trio, any number of combinations that we can bring to a home without a piano. So we have guitarists.
There you go.
And so, everything is really possible. It's just a question of finding out what the host desires.
Yeah, and again, it's just a magical way of getting to know the artists personally. You really have remarkable music, and it's just a wonderful, I would say, just informal, personal, intimate setting to hear beautiful music and get to know some remarkable people in your own home.
And in the end, that benefits Astral as well, because these are people who haven't been exposed to Astral before. They're friends of the host, and hopefully they will want to get incorporated in the other activities of Astral.
And become part of the Astral family.
Yeah.
And let's think a little bit bigger. Let's say I'm a presenter. I have an auditorium. I have a hall. Same question. Is there a procedure for me to get in touch with you if I want to engage some of your artists, or if I want to get more information about your roster?
Well, the roster is very well described on the website, and the electronic press kits and photographs are all there. But the first step is to maybe look at that roster and then to communicate with me at vera@astralartists.org and let us know, what presentation you might have in mind.
I just wanted to just throw this in. Astral is a nonprofit organization, and as such, needs funding, needs support, and you can apply for grants or such. But what is the best way for folks to get in touch with you and to express whatever level of support they can to keep the music alive and to help maintain the careers and launch the careers of so many promising young musicians? What would you recommend for folks who want to support our Astral?
We are funded through a number of levels. There's the government, there's city, there's there are the almighty individuals. Individuals can do more for nonprofits because they get to actually experience the programs. So the biggest support that any nonprofit can get is from the individuals that appreciate the programs and get the opportunity to share. And ultimately, this helps not only the artists on the roster, but the school children, those who are handicapped, those who are in rehab centers, everyone who is part of the Astral community and the music community, to sustain the programs and see that they endure beyond today.
We'll be sure to include links and contact information for the Astral organization, their website, phone number as well, so that if you're interested in supporting Astral, you can get in touch with Vera and her remarkable team to keep this wonderful organization providing the services that so many young musicians need, and it benefits the community at large. Vera, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to sit and chat and to share your wonderful story and to share the remarkable vision of Astral.
Well, it's really quite lovely to go through the various stages, because it makes me feel good that whatever hardship we may have had along the way, were we going to balance the budget, were we going to be okay, we're beyond that. You can never lose sight of going forward in the same manner as you got to this point. But I feel good that we have helped a large number of artists, and that the organization is in a good place. And I have to tell you, no one person can do everything. I am so lucky with the staff who graces Astrals.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This episode of A Musical Life has been brought to you by Astral, a nonprofit intensive mentoring program that specializes in developing the early careers of extraordinary classical musicians. With its forward-thinking approach, Astral concentrates its resources on a small number of rising star soloists and chamber ensembles with the potential to be changemakers and influencers. The payoff? Cohorts of artistic visionaries who leave Astral's program ready to build a future for classical music. For more information on Astral's artists, national auditions process, concert and community series, or for ways to become a patron and offer support, visit astralartists.org or call 215-735-6999. For links to Astral and details on the musical excerpts played in this episode, visit the show notes at amusicallife.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter to get updates on the latest episodes and special news. And leave a comment to let me know what you think. We have some fantastic guests lined up, and I can't wait to share their stories and music with you. And by the way, thank you for all your support. By listening, subscribing, and sharing this show with your friends, you're helping so many other folks discover this show. Until next time, I'm Hugh Sung, and I wish you a musical life.